Today we will be looking at the fourth module of fluid mechanics, which is the flow past immersed bodies. So the first topic we have is the drag coefficient. To understand this, we need to first understand what is drag. Drag is analogous to friction, and basically drag is what solids immersed in another fluid experience analogous to friction. So flow through an immersed solid, flow around an immersed solid is not perfectly smooth, and there is some frictional factors affecting the flow, and drag is the factor which we call uh, which we use to determine this coefficient. So the drag coefficient aptly is therefore defined as the ratio between the drag force per unit projected area to the product of the fluid density and the velocity head. Now what is this unit projected area? Suppose we are moving through the fluid and we have the solid sphere immersed in the fluid, and we can see the fluid and we can see the solid sphere as we are moving through the fluid. The front view of the solid sphere will be the unit projected area. As we know, the front view of a sphere is a circle, and so in this case the unit projected area will be a circle. So like this, while mentioning the drag coefficient, we have to mention the geometry of the object and its orientation. For example, for a cylinder, based on the orientation of the cylinder can be kept vertically or horizontally, and the cylinder can be kept axially or perpendicularly. So, based on all these orientations, the drag coefficient will change. And for different objects, the drag coefficient can be obtained as a function of the particle Reynolds number. So when we plot that, we find a few regions, and the drag coefficient relations can be found for each of these regions. So in the Stokes law region, where as we know the particle Reynolds number is less than 1, the drag coefficient or CD is found as 24 by Reynolds number, particle Reynolds number. And in the Newton's law range, which is the area between Reynolds number of 10 raised to 3 to 2 into 10 raised to 5, the drag coefficient is fairly constant at a rate of about 0.44. And in the transition region, there are many equations to find the drag coefficient in the transition region. We can also obtain it using the drag coefficient versus Reynolds number chart. But here I have given it as but here I have given an equation which is commonly used to find the drag coefficient. Next topic is one of the most important topics in this module, and it is the Ergun equation. So the Ergun equation, to understand it fully, I highly recommend you to read the McCabe, Smith and Harriot Unit Operations of Chemical Engineering textbook, and it explains it in a very simple way. So basically we have a term called sphericity. It is the measure of how close a given particle is to being a sphere. So the first line gives you the definition of sphericity, and from that we can find the surface volume ratio, that is SB by VP of a particle. It is given as 6 by 5 SdP. That is the first step in the derivation of the Ergun equation. In the next step, we define a velocity called the superficial velocity. That is equal to V times epsilon, where epsilon is the void volume fraction of the packed bed. So when we are considering a packed bed, it will be a packing of materials which will have some interstitial spaces in between. So the volume fraction of those interstitial spaces is what we denote by epsilon. So now to determine the Ergun equation, we have to also determine a characteristic length called the channel diameter or dq. The surface area for n parallel channels of length L is equal to the surface volume ratio times the particle volume. So as we can see, if we write n pi deq into L, what does that signify? So we know a channel is in the form of a cylinder, and the surface area of a cylinder is 2 pi RL. So that since 2r is equal to d equivalent here, so we can take the surface area as d equivalent into L. So for n channels, the total surface area would be n into pi into d equivalent into length. That is set equal to the surface area of the bed, which can be given by the surface volume ratio. So total surface area by volume, which we have derived in the first step, into the total volume of the packed bed, of the particles of the packed bed, in which S0 is the surface area of the cross-sectional area of the bed, L is the height of the bed, and 1 minus E gives you the fraction of the bed which contains the packed solids. And in the next step, we consider the void volume, in which we can say that the total void volume will be equal to the total volume of the n channels. So what is the volume of the n channels? We can see that again a channel is taken to be in the form of a cylinder. So the volume of the cylinder is given by 1 by 4 into pi d equivalent square into L into n times for n channels, which is set equal to the void volume in the bed. Void volume in the bed will be surface area of the bed into length of the bed into the void volume fraction. So combining both those equations, we get an equation for the equivalent diameter, which can be given as 2 by 3 phi s dp into epsilon by 1 minus epsilon. When we substitute that equation into the Hagen-Poiseuille equation, which is delta P by L equal to 32 V mu by Gc d square. Gc is here is given only because this expression is written in terms of the CGS units. When we write in terms of the SI units, we normally omit the GC term. So when we substitute our previous equation for D equivalent into this equation, Hagen-Poiseuille equation, we get the expression as delta P by L equal to 150 V0 mu times 1 minus epsilon the whole square by phi s square dp square into epsilon cube. This equation is also known as the Kozny-Karman equation, and it is found useful for Reynolds number less than 1, which is normally obtained in the Stokes law regime. And when the Reynolds number increases much beyond that, we can substitute the equation for equivalent diameter into the Darcy equation, which is delta P by L equals 2f rho v square by d equivalent. When we substitute that, we get the equation as the Burke-Plummer equation, in which the constant is 1.75 and the whole equation is delta P by L equals 1.75 rho v square into 1 minus epsilon by phi s dp into epsilon cube. And so when we this equation is was observed in the high Reynolds number region. So when Reynolds number is more than 1000. So for deriving a general equation for pressure drop across all regions, we consider the assumption that the viscous losses, which is caused by the equation given by the Kozny-Karman equation, and the kinetic energy losses, which is given by the Burke-Plummer equation, we consider that over the entire range, both these losses are additive. So the entire result from this is known as the Ergun equation, which combines both the Kozny-Karman equation and the Burke-Plummer equation. Next, we move on to the topic of fluidization. So, what is fluidization? In simple terms, if we consider a packed bed of materials, when we pass a fluid through the packed bed. So, we know through common sense that if we pass the fluid at low velocities, the bed of particles won't move. But if we continue to increase the velocity of the fluid, there comes a time when the particles of the bed start moving, and eventually the fluid takes away a lot of the suspension, a lot of the particles in the form of a suspension. So what happens is the bed of particles become embedded in the fluid in a sort of a suspension, and this phenomenon is known as fluidization. And what happens with fluidized beds is that they are very helpful in conducting a lot of chemical operations, like unit operations, like which involves mass transfer, heat transfer. Fluidized beds are very reactive, very essential, very easy to operate, and they can give us a wide range of applications. This is a graphical representation of what happens during fluidization. As we can see this, when the superficial, as we can see from the curve above, the superficial velocity when increased does not affect the pressure drop up until the point A. That is when, as we have discussed before, the velocity is not enough to make the particles rise out from the bed. But when it crosses the point A, and there's a slight increase till the point P, and that is a point where fluidization begins to start, just begins, or the particles are just about to move throughout the bed. And point B is the point where true fluidization begins, and above that point, the pressure drop is a linear function of the superficial velocity. What that means is that as we go on increasing the fluid flow velocity, the particles of the bed become easily separated from each other, and they are free to move about in the fluid. So what happens is that when particles are free to move about in the fluid, the pressure drop across the bed increases, and that is what happens after the point P. And when we come back, when we decrease the fluid velocity uh, to reach the initial state, we find that a slight difference is found because of the difference in arrangement of the packed bed. So when we first increase the velocity, fluidize the bed, and when we try to bring it back, we find that the initial state is not really achieved. This slide gives you the starting conditions necessary for a fluidized bed. We consider a vertical tube open at the top filled with granular material. The granular material forms the packed bed. So it has a porous bottom plate through which air is admitted. So in this case, the fluid which we are admitting is air. So when as we can see, if there's a porous plate at the bottom, air can come through it and start to contact the packed bed above it. So as air is admitted at low velocities, pressure drop is low and the particles do not move because the momentum imparted by the fluid, by the air, is not enough to make the particles move. So gradually when we increase the velocity of the air from the bottom, what we find is that there will be obviously the force of gravity of the packed bed uh, acting in the downward direction, and the force exerted by the fluidized air and the force exerted by the fluid, which is the air, will be trying to make the particles go upwards. So at low velocities the force of gravity will be greater than this fluidizing force, and the bed will not move, but at higher velocities the bed will start to move. This is just a summary of what we explained from our observations in the graph, in which we said that after a certain point when the bed starts to fluidize, the pressure drop continuously increases along with the increase in the superficial velocity, and the fluidized bed of particles move in the form of a suspension towards the top of the column. And if there is no protection available in the at the top, the fluid will of course overflow, and the velocity at which that happens is known as the entrainment velocity. And in this slide we can see what happens when the fluid velocity is decreased when it's after fluidization. So when it is decreased, we see that the resting bed height is slightly higher than the original one, because the packing becomes tighter than the one which we provided initially. Next we will discuss some of the common types of fluidization observed. So in the first type, called particulate fluidization, it is characterized by a large but uniform expansion of the bed at high velocities. So what that happens is when the velocity is increased, there's a large expansion of the bed. So the bed particles move throughout the fluid at a greater distance. But we also see that the average bed density, which is the mass of the particles plus the fluid per unit volume, is the same in all sections of the bed at a given velocity. So when we are operating the fluidized bed at a particular velocity, in the case of particulate fluidization, the average bed density will be the same at all parts of the bed. A common example is the fluidization of sand particles with water. The next important topic is bubbling fluidization, in which immediately after the minimum fluidization velocity, most of the gas admitted flows as bubbles free of solids. So what does this mean? This means that when the gas, which is the fluid, is admitted through the bottom and made to flow through the packed bed. In this type, what happens is that the gas will flow in the form of bubbles. So these bubbles are what pushes the bed particles against each other and causes them to move upwards. So this is mainly observed, as we can see, when solids are fluidized by air. A small fraction of the gas also flows between the solids through the interstitial spaces. So, but one problem associated with bubbling fluidization is that when the column diameter is very small, the bubbles which are formed due to the fluid velocity tend to be big enough to fill the entire column. So there will be spaces in the packed bed where there's only the huge bubble of the gas. So these bubbles also tend to come together, aggregate into a big bubble, and there will be spaces without no fluid, without no solids in the packed bed. This is a highly undesirable phenomenon and is known as slugging. Slugging is basically when the solids are pushed apart by the bubbles which coalesce and form big bubbles in which there are no space for solids. So what the problems caused by slugging is fluctuations in pressure drop, increased entrainment, and difficulties in scaling up to larger units. So it is difficult to make large fluidized beds when slugging occurs. This slide gives you a simple relation between the uh, properties at the minimum fluidization velocity and at any other velocity, when it can be extensively used in numerical questions. So by rearranging, in this case we are considering for particulate fluidization, and by rearranging the Ergun equation for laminar flow in which the particle Reynolds number is less than 1, we get that the term epsilon cube by 1 minus epsilon is proportional to the velocity of the fluid. So if we consider Lm and epsilon m to be the bed height and porosity at the minimum fluidization velocity, by using the above relation we can see that L, that means the bed height at the velocity we want to find out, is equal to the bed height at the minimum velocity multiplied by 1 minus epsilon m by 1 minus epsilon. So epsilon m is the porosity of the bed at the minimum fluidization velocity, and epsilon is the case which we are considering. So for larger particles, expansion is greater than expected from this equation. The last few topics are about the advantages of fluidization. As we have mentioned in the beginning, it ensures easy transport of solids due to the fluidity. So because the solids are now fluidized, they are easy to be transported, so across various chemical operations. And the vigorous mixing of the solids ensure that there exists no temperature gradient within the bed, even if the reaction is highly exothermic or endothermic. So we can see that fluidized beds are extensively used in chemical reactors because of their isothermal properties. There are no temperature gradient exists between the top and the bottom of the bed, and we can perform reactions very easily with beds like these. And violent motion of the solid gives high rate of heat transfer to the wall. So it is extensively used in cases where we need, as we know in chemical engineering, the main topics are heat transfer, mass transfer, and fluid transfer, momentum transfer. So in cases where we want extensive heat transfer between two particles, or the particle and the fluid, or the particle and the walls, we can use fluidized beds, and they provide excellent heat transfer mechanism. And if we come to the disadvantages of fluidization, in the case of gas solid fluidization, the process offers uneven contact between the phases. So this occurs mainly due to phenomena like slugging, as we discussed before, and sometimes there can be an uneven contact. Some areas of the fluidized bed may be contacting with a more amount of fluid, and some areas may not even get contacted with the fluid, and that can be a problematic issue, and it causes a loss of fine particles. So when we are dealing with fine particles in the packed bed or in the fluid, uh, fluidized beds are usually not effective, and but this can be solved by using cyclone separators, which will recover the fine particles from the fluid. And it also causes erosion of internal parts of the vessel or attrition of the solids. So as we can know, if a fluid is admitted at high velocity through a packed bed of solids, the solids will roughly contact between each other, and that may cause erosion of the solids, and also because of the solids moving at high velocity throughout the walls of the container may cause erosion of the internal parts of the column also. Another disadvantage is that fluidized beds are very expensive to make and the cost of operation is pretty high. Coming to the applications, fluidization, as we discussed again and again, has one of the most widely used is one of the most widely used phenomena in chemical industries, and it is used in catalyst regeneration, especially in catalytic cracking in the petroleum industry. So in petroleum refineries, fluidized beds are extensively used. So fluid bed combustion of coal, as it reduces boiler costs and decreases the emission of pollutants. Then fluidized beds are also used for roasting ores, drying solids, and absorbing gases. Is used in catalytic processes such as synthesis of acrylonitrile. That is because the fluidized bed will provide a high surface area for the catalyst to act, and it provides a high reaction mechanism, a high rate of reaction, with a good reaction mechanism. It is also used. Fluidized beds are also used for in wastewater treatment plants and many other applications. The final topic in this module is the derivation for the minimum fluidization velocity. I haven't provided the full derivation here, but it is easily available from the textbook of McCabe-Smith. Um, we get an expression for the minimum fluidization velocity from the Ergun equation, and then we have two cases. Basically, when we apply the Stokes law regime and when we apply the Newton's law regime for low Reynolds number and high Reynolds number respectively. So basically what I can say is with this we come to the end of the module, and fluid mechanics is absolutely not a hard subject. What you have to do is read and try to understand maximum from textbooks available. Keep a copy of McCabe-Smith, either a hard copy or a soft copy, and keep it as a bible of fluid mechanics. Reading through that, once or twice will definitely make you understand. Try to have the enthusiasm to know more about the subject. It is a very interesting subject, so keep reading the textbook and I'm sure all of you will perform well. Thank you.